Welcome back, 40k theorists. You're watching Theory Hammer, and I'm your outrageous host, the one, the only KevBot, and today we're talking about 6th edition Warhammer 40k. This is the next video in our past edition discussion series, so if you have not seen the first couple videos in the playlist, I'll include the playlist itself in the description. For those of you who are new here, this entire series is a way for us to kind of get a handle on how Warhammer has changed over time. So in this video, I'm going to be discussing why this edition was so forgettable, what GW did to push its models out in this edition, and generally just kind of reminisce about how the game was at the time and like highlights, lowlights, lasting impressions, stories, that kind of stuff. So do something crazy to that like button, crash your Blackstone Fortress into it, make sure that also rings Nurgle's bell at the same time, subscribe to Theory Hammer, tell us about your 6th edition escapades in a comment down below, and of course check out our other videos. We got a lot of content, and we're constantly making more, and when I say we, I really just mean me. So if you want to support, it's free, and I'll give you a big old kiss. So in all seriousness, friends, Theory Hammer is about to be at 500 subs, and I'm super excited about it. So the more support you guys show me, the more videos I can make, the higher the quality will become, all that stuff. So 6th edition Warhammer 40k. This edition was just so stupid. It was like 5th edition, but with way worse rules and mechanics. And I remember only a few things from this edition, which was like there were allies everywhere and Imperial Knights were completely ridiculous. When 6th edition came out, it started to become clear that GW was using a very specific object to sell their models, in addition to having an insanely ramped up release schedule compared to 5th edition. In this edition, in 6th edition, there was a newly added allies system, which allowed factions to ally together. And it was mostly a fucking free-for-all. Now I do have to say, I cannot quite remember if it was 6th edition or if it was 7th edition that allowed like anyone to ally with anyone, just whatever. I don't have the actual ally system in front of me, I'm just winging this shit as always, but I know you had Battle Brothers, Allies of Convenience, Desperate Allies, and Come the Apocalypse, and as you moved down the chart, things got more and more restrictive, to the point where if two units got too close to each other, one of them may be stuck doing abso-fucking-lutely nothing because they had to roll dice, and on a roll of a 1, they just sat there and looked at the opposing unit and they were like, you're not going to turn on us, right? And so that friendly unit like couldn't do anything because that allied unit was so like treacherous, maybe, because you rolled a 1. Anyway, I'm almost certain like some factions could not ally together even for Come the Apocalypse, or if you could, maybe people just didn't do it because it was too risky because of the roll. It's like One Eye Open, I think it was called. I'm pretty sure that complete nonsense was reserved for 7th edition, but if I'm wrong, let me know down below. This whole fucking thing was wacky, dude. Like, you had the wildest armies ever, and it was a complete 180 from how armies could be constructed in 5th edition. Remember from my 5th edition video that you were stuck with a single codex. You had to min-max from within a codex, and factions did not get updates regularly. So there was no like release-based meta chasing, and in 6th edition, you min-maxed between multiple codexes, and this shit was wild in this edition, bro. And it was how GW pushed models in the edition, in addition to their release schedule, and it did major damage to the balance of the game. Specifically, well, there wasn't really any balance at all. And something I did not actually state in either of the last two videos was that in 5th edition, there was basically 8 releases. There was 9 if you count a White Dwarf for Sissors, which didn't have a whole lot of rules for them. And in this edition, that edition was 4 years long, 5th edition. By comparison, 6th edition had 15 different releases. They had 11 codexes and like 5 supplements or 4 supplements, which I'm gonna count. So 15 is more than 9 or 8, and this edition lasted less than 2 years. So half the time, twice the releases, this edition was just so forgettable because it was just such a shit show. Like, we want to forget it. Nothing made sense. I legitimately cannot remember the rules entirely, but I want to say it was definitely like 5th edition with a ton of significant changes that just made it worse. Like, it was clunky. It was like if GW put square wheels on a car and, you know, it got all fucked up immediately when it broke down the second they tried driving it off the lot. So there's like a reason that this edition lasted 2 years. Now, I will admit, it was a fun time to be a part of Warhammer, for someone like me at least, because we wanted to play it at like the highest possible level, as competitively as possible, and now we had the opportunity to combine shit together and make weird, fun combos that could do like cool, kooky things. So to us, we were just taking our gameplay to the next level by really like digging into it and finding the best things to combo together between allied races or allied factions. We played into GW's hand though in a way, because this ally system was a way for them to sell a ton of models, and because we started using the allies system, we kind of unknowingly started creating I guess I'd call it a toxic environment at the competitive level, not with like the players themselves, but like with the way that the game was played. Like, okay, this is what I mean. This is when I met Nick Nanavati, Jack Harpster, like I already knew Matt DeFranz, I knew Andrew Gagne, I knew Justin Cook. And so like those types of players, this like cabal of really good players who were already at the high level, well, they just leaned into comboing and meta chasing like full tilt, like exactly what GW wanted. And I did too, but I wasn't quite at their level. Although I would frequent Nick and Jack's store a lot, and me and Justin have always been cool. Gagne I don't ever see. DeFranz and I are cool as well, but either way, like they're all just much better players, and so they were really the people that were kind of, engineering some of these lists. Not just them, there were others as well. But you put all those really good people together with all their really crazy combos. This kind of created an atmosphere where it's exactly what GW wanted. Those caliber of players are the people who brought the powerful lists that we would see at the time. And this almost made them like Warhammer influencers, I guess, before any of them were actually Warhammer influencers. At the competitive level, the comboing and the allying, it compelled other players who were also at the competitive level, or just at the competitive scene, to copy or put their own spin on a known good list. And so they bought the models for it, which could have been from almost any faction because you could ally. So it's just like money, 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 money to GW. And so that's really what the competitive scene turned into. High-level people finding new crazy ways to combine allied shit together to beat the current crazy allied combo. You'd see people just running and jumping on this bandwagon and comboing all this crap together, and this really drove a lot of GW's sales in this edition, along with, of course, the releases that they did have, which was actually a lot. But like then it started to get old, like it was too much too quick, and people started leaving the hobby because of how broken the balance was. Things were happening way too fast, and nothing, and I mean like nothing, was balanced. They had an FAQ, but they didn't change points and stuff, so it was basically just the Wild West, and things could ally together, and so you could make lists that were just insanely OP. But then something else would come along and counter it, and that cycle continued. And then when releases happened, that just exacerbated the issue, because now those new rules, those new units, those new things could be combined with the other existing things. There were just so many possibilities, which on one hand seems great, until it's not. The designers can't like always consider every possible combination, and they can't like test it like the players can. It's impossible, trust me. I work in development. Like until we have even more advanced AI, that shit's impossible. So balance in this edition wasn't a thing. Like it wasn't a thing. And there's really not much more I can say about that. Now like, compared to the balance issues we have in 10th, this was way, way, way fucking worse. Like uncomparably worse. But with this edition, GW had a slightly different strategy. They had the ally system and they had releases. So in 10th edition, we have the release schedule and that's pretty much it. The release schedule in 10th edition is probably about the same rate as 6th edition though, but the balance of codexes and the indexes that have been, like that came out at the beginning were just fucked. And I don't think that that was intentional. Like maybe it was, but I don't really think that that was. I think that was just a product of creating 27 or however many factions there are, trying to give them an index for each one, and play test it with every possible combo before release. It's not scalable. You'd have to have a huge number of, like it's easier to just run the numbers through some sort of simulator and just come up with it that way. So anyway, I mean, what do you guys think? Were all the insane units that everyone wanted like at the start of 10th not selling well in 9th or something? So let's just take a quick stop to see some examples of this. We get, and I've talked about this in other videos, but I'm not gonna spend a lot of time here. So Marines and Tyranids, like there's no comparison there. Interesting and cool detachments versus boring and half useless detachments combined with a total dogshit army rule. Admech and Necrons, like what the fuck happened there? Am I right? Admech are the most expensive army to collect, and one of the worst armies right now. Dark Angels and something, Tau? We're gonna go with Tau. Tau be silly, yo. Dark Angels be silly, yo, but in like the bad way. You get Custodians and Orcs. I think the Orcs would say, "Nuff said." You get the idea, but compared to 6th edition, dude, even with the balance in this edition sometimes being a shit show right now, like GW is constantly scrambling to change and update its points and its rules, and it can't get anything right, but at least they're making an effort, and hey, it also gets people buying models, right? It keeps the meta changing all the time, right? People gotta build new lists every 3 months, so people gotta keep spending money every 3 months, right? So the difference between how the meta was shaped in 6th and 10th edition is different. But talking balance, 6th edition was just horrifically way worse than 10th edition, even at like the start of 10th edition. Now, I do have some stories from 6th edition, like it's when I met Nick, it's when I met Jack. It's one of the first years I went to Nova. I started the edition with a Centurion star. So basically what you do is you take a bunch of Psychers from different Marines, because they're all battle brothers, and you would attach them to a Centurion squad, they would then get Gate of Infinity, and they would teleport around the table, and you would just murder 2 units a turn with it. I had like some scouts and like 2 Storm Ravens and the Centurion squad. Like that was pretty much the whole army. It was pretty hard to play. It relied heavily on getting the right powers because, if I remember correctly, your powers were randomized. And then once Tau came out, we saw the Ovasa Star, and that was way more fun to play. This was just a unit of Riptides with what came to be known as a buff commander. The commander, like himself, had no guns, but he just had a shitload of war gear and like relics and a bunch of other shit, and he basically gave the unit every rule in the game, like not even fucking kidding. And then back then, you could also allocate wounds to anyone in the unit, I think. And since you had 2 Riptides with drones and shit like that, you basically couldn't get through this unit before it killed you. And it wasn't even bad in combat, because the Onager Gauntlet on the commander and the Riptides themselves were monsters, which I think had some combat effect that back then. Now, I don't remember everything about it, but I remember it was 4 Riptides. You know, one was a character, you had some suits, you had some Skyrays, and that was about it. And the Ovasa Star just killed everything, dude. You couldn't lock it in combat, you couldn't stop it from shooting, you just got fucked. What a fun time. I do believe Justin Cook won Nova that year against Matt DeFranza using the Ovasa Star in 6th edition. So honest to the God Emperor, 10th edition is actually much better than 6th edition in like a variety of ways. 10th edition has a better rule set and honestly probably has better missions. And I'm only saying that because I can't remember what the missions were like in 6th, and so I'm just going to assume that they were as bad as the rule set, if they even existed in the core rules. And while I may bitch and moan about 10th edition, it is more balanced and honestly way more fun than 6th edition. I really dislike 10th for a variety of reasons, but I enjoy the games that I do play a bit. 6th edition was a fucking grind, dude. When I was in 6th edition, I performed so badly until I was playing the Ovasa Star that I considered just straight quitting the game, selling all my models, just being out. Because remember, we just came off the backs of a 4-year-long, very well respected and loved edition. And this new edition was just completely different in all the worst ways. And if I wanted to remain at these higher levels, I felt like I kind of had to meta chase. And so there was this time when I seriously considered just quitting, because I remember back then that the game was just frustrating and exhausting. Because a lot of the skill went out the window and was replaced by just insane armies because of allying. And I can straight attest that. Like, the list that I ran played completely different than the list that I ran in 5th. And I'm sure that I made a ton of mistakes with this new list, but like, it wouldn't matter most of the time. I would just blow units off the table and there was nothing you could do about it. I specifically remember at the time just thinking to myself, this requires no skill, like it's point and click. Just about every list in the edition was point and click. The combo aspect of it was just you're comboing from different codexes. The combos themselves did not have rules that allowed them to be like comboed together from different codexes, if that makes sense. So like, you could have 2 codex rules that complemented each other in game, but there was no like, this datasheet ability affects this other codex, except in cases with Battle Brothers, I think. So generally speaking, and I would say definitely more true in 10th, mostly, is that skilled players can usually outwit their opponent, even if their opponent has a better list. In 6th edition, that was technically true, but things were very rock, paper, scissors, where you may just hit a list you simply like cannot mathematically beat unless absolutely everything goes wrong for your opponent and they play really bad. Like, I was losing to people that I absolutely crushed in prior editions, who I knew had less skill than me. And it was because their list was just so hard to counter, or just straight countered mine, or because it was just so fucking powerful that there's no chance I can mathematically win as long as I do like 10% of the things right. And this got worse in 7th, but I'll leave that for the 7th edition video. And so we have this concept of like a stat check list, meaning a list you come up against and basically just lose to on paper. But I do feel like this is less prevalent with the rules updates and the balance and changes and such, like talking 10th edition again here. But overall, just about every codex in 10th has had the capability to win a big event. Not all of them, but I do think all factions, and I'm including indexes too, in the hands of the right player, could go all the way, like 20 out of the 27, or maybe half. I don't know, maybe more than half. And so 10th edition is definitely better than 6th in just about every possible way. Like, if I had the choice for a permanent edition that was never changed, and without thinking, I would just choose 10th over 6th. That's how monumentally bad this edition was. And so next, I'll take you guys on a little adventure into 6th edition, and some of the few things that I do remember. Like, I remember powers were randomized, which was different from 5th. I remember there was allies. I remember you couldn't split fire, which was something that both the Cent Star and the Ovasa Star could do. I remember that, like, my Cent Star really pissed me off because I had to roll for my powers. I really needed to get Gate of Infinity from a Grey Knight guy, and I had a bunch of them, but so I had multiple chances to try to get it. But I also really needed invisibility, so that blasts and flamers couldn't hit me. There's a whole bunch of powers that I really needed. I probably needed other ones, but like Gate of Infinity and Invisibility were the absolute two that I needed. And guess what happened in like half or more of my games? That's right, I did not get Gate or Invisibility, or sometimes both. And like my list really hinged on the powers that I did get. If I did not get Gate, I basically lost. Because that unit of Centurion, they moved like 4 inches. They were so fucking slow. Like against someone who was not rocking the craziest list out there, I could play it well enough where I like had a chance to win, but not having those powers made the game exponentially more difficult. And I just remember the lists could take on anything if I got the right powers. And so I do remember just being constantly frustrated with the list because if I got the powers I needed, I won, but if I didn't, I kind of just lost. And I had a different mindset about the game as well back then, which also kind of contributed to the frustration, but generally that was kind of my feeling on it. And then you have Imperial Knights. Basically the way my weapons work is that they just glance you to death if you were a vehicle. Imperial Knights lost hull points for each hit they took, like each glancing hit. So whether they took a penetrating hit or a glancing hit, they lost a hull point. And so if I did not roll 6 6s trying to wound this damn thing, it would just live and then kill the entire Centurion star. And so once Knights came out, I'm like, I fucking hate these things, dude. Like, why are they legal? And then later on, we started seeing Knights with Void Shield generators, which basically every army in the game had a Void Shield at this point because it was a fortification that you could just take. And so that's the final nail in the coffin for my list. Like, Void Shields made it so that I had to be, like, within some range, I think, to, like, ignore the Void Shield. I forget exactly what it did if you were outside of its range, but I think I had to be within 12 inches of the Void Shield itself, and then its effects were nullified. So if I gate my Centurions within 12 inches of the Void, like, within the Void Shield, I can actually shoot the Knight and actually have a chance to kill it, but if I didn't kill it, I just lost. And instead, I just threw the game. In retrospect, I probably shouldn't have tried to kill it, but hey, that's what I did. I lost because of it, so the list was just, it gave me a lot of trouble. So once that list was obsolete though, I started running the Ovesa Star, which was a Tau army. And I've been racking my brain here trying to remember how you create this unit, because it's got monsters, but like, and normally you couldn't attach to monsters, but like you could. I'm assuming Ovesa attached to the Riptide, and then the rest of the characters attached to Ovesa, because characters could like attach together if they were both characters or something. That's the only way I can imagine it working right now without like legit breaking out the rulebook from back then. And doing that's not going to happen because who cares? And that's how it worked. It was a thing at One Nova, and that's that. So this list was awesome though. It could deal with just anything, like Knights, Eldar, you know, anything. Admittedly, it's a great example of a list that did not require a ton of skill to pick up and win with though. It did require skill to win with at high levels, but not like the RTT level. The Riptides got a 3-up invuln back then. They would just point and click, delete stuff. They could split fire. I don't even remember what Ovesa gave the unit, if anything, but the unit was just insane. Like, both the Riptides were monsters, and I think they had universal rules where they could, like, they were AP2 or they ignored saves. They were somehow decent in combat. And then I have the buff commander with the Augur Gauntlets. They're actually threatening despite being a Tau unit. And then, like I said earlier, the buff commander would just give them everything in the game, like every possible special rule. Like, ignores cover, fallback shoot, split fire, I don't even know what else, but just name it, I probably had it. And so you would just have this insane unit that just took the center of the table, and there's basically just nothing you could do. And I think this was when suits could move, shoot, move. And so, like, your Riptides would shoot around corners and then move behind terrain and then not get shot back. Like, very fair stuff. Like, when did Tau become Eldar and just get the ability to do anything? Oh wait, it was this edition. I remember. So yeah, I met Jack then as well. I met Nick, like I said. I met a few others, Cameron, Brad. But other than that, like, there isn't really much more to say. I don't think my funny Nick Nadavati story is from this edition, so you'll probably have to wait until the next video in 7th edition to hear about that. So, yeah, I don't think there's really too much more to say, because again, this edition was less than 2 years long. And so there's not a whole bunch of time to create as many stories and memories as other editions. So with that, guys, I hope that gives you a better idea of how things have started to morph for GW. A little bit of insight into how 6th edition was and what drove it, and you know how 10th edition is much better despite its objective, obvious flaws. But yeah, 6th edition, complete 180 from 5th in terms of how the meta was formed and how GW started to understand how to really squeeze their customers up until what we see today. And the next video, we're going to see an evolution and the continuation of this process of GW squeezing their customers into 7th edition. The edition that almost killed GW, which is where shit hits the fan. You thought 6th edition was unbalanced and ridiculous? Oh baby, strap yourself in, because 7th edition was a traumatizing experience that I need therapy for. So as always, my good theorists, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video about 10th edition, then become Battle Brothers, yeah, with the like button. Subscribe to Theory Hammer, leave us a comment, ring Nurgle's bell, check out our other videos. What do you guys remember about 6th edition? Does anyone here disagree? Think 6th edition was better than 10th? Let me know down below. And with that, I gotta go get really drunk so that I can prepare myself for this dive into 7th edition. So until then, theorists, I'll catch you in the next video.